Now, the former director of the Israeli Missile Defense Organization outlined some of the missile threats ISIS and Iran pose today. This was part of a series on nuclear deterrence, missile defense, proliferation, and arms control. The Air Force Association, the National Defense Industrial Association, and the Reserve Officers Association hosted this hour-long event.
I want to welcome you all here to this, our next breakfast in our seminar series on nuclear deterrence and missile defense, proliferation, and arms control. I want to welcome our friends from C-SPAN that are here this morning. My name is Peter Husey, and on behalf of the Air Force Association, the National Defense Industrial Association, and the Reserve Officers Association of America, I want to thank you all and welcome our sponsors, especially our friends from the Israeli Embassy. I want to thank you for being here today. Also want to thank two of my former Missile Defense Information Group colleagues and friends, Alison Fortier and John, both from formerly with Lockheed Martin. I want to thank them for being here today as well. And I want to also say hello to our head of our Government Affairs program at the Air Force Association that is joining us here today as well. Uzi Rubin, as you know, is in many people's minds the father of missile defense in Israel. He was head of the Missile Defense Organization in office in Israel and father of the Aero program. He speaks around the world on missile developments in the Middle East and their threats to both the United States and our allies, in particular Israel, as well as being a missile defense expert. And one of our dear friends and colleagues come all the way from Israel to be with us today. Uzi, we want to welcome you here on behalf of our sponsors. Would you all give a warm welcome to Uzi Rubin?
Thank you, Peter. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to be in this great venue. I try to be here about once a year to update you people about the recent things in the threat arena and the missile defense in the Middle East. This time, I chose to update you on spread of rockets and missiles and ISIS and other warring radical militias. There are now too innumerable to name, but the main point will be Iran's integrated, I have no other names except integrated space and missile program. So I'll try to show to you these two programs are not parallel, they are actually the same program. And finally, a few words about progress in Israel missile defense. When the Iran agreement was concluded, I think it was concluded, it's not sure, but it's concluded, taken as concluded, I was more or less on my flight here. So it doesn't reflect in my show, and I really am not aware of many of the details. So I have no prepared remarks on that, but I'll be happy to answer questions to the best of my ability, not on the specifics and the details, which I don't know, but about the implications. So if you have any questions about just that, hold on. But it's a very good question, not excellent question. You know, excellent question has slides. I don't have slides, so it'll be only good questions. Let me speak first about the rockets and missiles on radicals, warring parties in the Middle East. Let me show you several pictures. Here is a picture from the Sinai, very recent one, and it shows the fires rocket into southern Israel for supporting Egypt. Last week there was a big attack by ISIS in the Sinai against Egyptian town of Sheikh Zayed. By the way, very nice town by the beach. We used to bath there, take in the Mediterranean in the old times. Beautiful, magnificent beach. So here are rockets, Grad rockets, fired at Israel from a new front now in the Sinai. It was a quiet front for so many years. But this makes sense. Here is ISIS. They don't like us, and they fire rockets at us. What is more bizarre is this picture. And this shows ISIS firing rockets, not at us, but at Hezbollah. I mean, I can't believe my ears when I'm saying that. But here they are firing rockets at Hezbollah for supporting Assad. And some of the rockets I can't identify, this one at the left, but you can see their emblem here, the black flag. And here's the black flags with rockets on them This was last winter in the snowy wastes of upper Lebanon, firing rockets at Assad forces. So just show you how complex the picture is now in the Middle East. Now I'm revisiting something which I showed a few years ago in this audience too, and this is ballistic missiles in the hand of ISIS. The story goes like this. This building here is what's supposed to be the Syrian nuclear reactor. That was taken out, so it was reported by, according to news media, by the Israel Air Force in 2007, and was immediately, the ruins were demolished by the Assad regime and bulldozed over before the Atomic Energy IAEA could come and inspect it. And instead of it, satellite photo shows that the building with the blue roof was built on that site. Here is the blue building. It was a mystery what was in that building. 2 years ago, the insurgents published a video showing them occupying that the same blue building and finding in it Scud missiles. Amazingly, probably Scud Bs. But what was amazing here was that the launching mechanism was not the original launching mechanism. This is something new, designed locally either by Iraqi engineers or Syrian engineers. The narration here said that those were Iraqi missiles transferred by Saddam Hussein to Syria, to Assad, in order to be used against Israel, and faulting Assad for not firing at Israel. But that could be propaganda, I'm not sure. Anyway, this is the last time we saw these missiles until about half a year ago. Here they are again, now in Basra, in the hand of ISIS. So they have now Scud missiles, which are operational. They are not operational, but you know that ISIS is drawing a lot of volunteers, a lot of talent from all over the Islamic world, and they have missile experts there. And it could be that missile will be made operational and could be used. So here we have ISIS with ballistic missiles. Speaking about rockets and missiles in the hands of militias, a whole zoo of missiles is now appearing in Iraq, apparently homemade by pro-Shia or Shia pro-Iranian militias, and there are dozens of them, making homemade rockets. You see homemade rockets here, although I'm not sure everything is homemade here. The rocket engine is very big. It's solid propellant, too large to be manufactured in Iraq these days. I don't think they have the industry. So it's probably a 600 millimeter Iranian rocket engine being transported or supplied by them to the local militia, who work it up into all kind of a whole zoo. And I'm just showing you several pictures out of dozens of different designs that they show is, look at the launchers. This is a regular Iraqi army. You can see the Iraqi flag here, a truck on which a very capable looking launcher, launching ray with hydraulics is installed. Same rocket is installed here on some kind of improvised tipper truck. So you see this, all the shops there in Iraq are producing rockets. And here is another, this is another type of rocket on a regular launcher, on a good launcher like this one here with the flags, and they have dozens of flags, and I looked it up in the flags of the world in the Google, and you find all kind of strange flags there, strange militias. In one that caught my ear was a militia called Shabak. Well, it's not our Shabak, it's not the General Security Service. It's a real name of something we never heard about, such an ethnic group called Shabak, which are associated with the Kurds, are some kind of a splinter Kurd community. And they have now their own militias with their own flags. So you see all those flags here. And here you see more of those zoos of rockets. Those are usually, these are bombardment rockets. Look at this strange animal. And the rocket and the huge, huge warhead. They are short-range bombardment rockets in order to fight in closed quarters in urban area. All those flags are well identified. They are Shia militias in Iraq. And look at this strange beast here. So again, I'm showing you a very short collection of dozens and dozens of rockets are coming there, are all gearing up to fight ISIS, to retake the part of Iraq, the western Iraq that was taken by ISIS. Not very successfully as of now. Now, talking about creativity, in Syria, the local rocket production goes on, and here I'm showing you again out of a huge selection. I could still sit here and weary you for 2 hours with all this fascinating stuff that comes. For me as an engineer, fascinating stuff. You see homemade rockets in some workshop in northern Syria, but the added zest here is that the warhead is a canister, commercial canister of cooking gas with a fuse. There is a short video showing it being tested. Believe me, it's a fuel air bomb. It destroys buildings. It's amazing. So the creativity here is really noticeable. And here it's being loaded into the launcher. This pipe is not a tube. It's not a gun. It's just a pipe that stabilizes it when it goes out. It's flying on a rocket of its own. So while the insurgents are doing that, the Syrian army is increasing its firepower with the help of outside forces. The latest addition that we see is this Russian-made 220 millimeter MLRS called Uragan. Last time we saw it in action was in Georgia in 2008. A very impressive firepower. But look at this emblem here. Let's see a close-up of it. Here is a close-up of that emblem, and this is a Syrian officer. And this is the emblem you find in Google of the Russian airborne troops. In other words, this is an emergency supply of rocket systems directly out of the Russian army depots. That shows how desperate the situation is there. They just fly them in or ship them in right there, even without repainting them, and they immediately go to battle. So that's the other side of the. We'll meet this launcher somewhere else in the Middle East, in a few slides down the show. Talking about homemade rockets and funnies, here is another set of homemade rockets which show some Iranian influence, and that's in Yemen. All of a sudden in Yemen too, this rocket industry is kicking into business. Apparently they have enough workshop there, or it's Iraqi workshops inspired by Iran, because this is very similar to one of the rockets that we saw here. Look at that. That's very similar to that. So I see some, seems to me, fingerprints of Iranian capability here in Yemen. Talking about Yemen, which is another very active arena for rocket fire on both sides. Here are Yemeni government missiles before the outbreak of the civil war. Now they had missiles. Amazingly enough, they had ballistic missiles, both supplied by Soviet Union and then North Korea. If you remember, there were two Yemens. It was North Yemen and South Yemen, and I think in 1998 they had a civil war, and they fired missiles at each other. Russian supplied missiles. The South fired Scud-Bs at Tana and caused damage and casualties. There was one case they killed 32 civilians. And the North fired SS-21. This is SS-21. It's a tactical rocket, 120, but accurate, with a CP of accuracy of less than 100 meters. It's a counter-value weapon with a range of about 120 kilometers, which is equipped now, is equipping the Syrian army, which is using it regularly against the rebels. It used good effect in 2008 against Georgia by the Russians. And here it is in some kind of an arms demonstration in the pre-Civil War Yemeni army. As soon as Saudi Arabia intervention started, the Saudi declared that they have destroyed the ballistic missile depots of the Yemeni army in order for them not to fall in the hands of the rebels. So the next time we saw is a Scud in the hand of the Houthi rebels. Seems to be completely undestroyed. Here it's a transporter going from somewhere to somewhere. The picture was taken from smartphone of some driver on the road. I added here another picture of another, if you remember that system. Here it is again, but now in Yemen. So we never heard that the Yemeni government had it before. And it's not just in Yemen, it's in Yemen in rebels' hands. So we never heard that the Yemeni government had it. Maybe they had it unadvertised and it fell into the hand of the rebels, or one can conjure some connection here that once this weapon appears in Syria, it can go all the way via Iran down to Yemen. So maybe newly supplied Russian, and you see two systems like that here. But going back to that Scud, very unsurprisingly, the next thing we heard was interception of a Scud fired at Saudi Arabia by the Yemeni rebels. They say they fired several. The Saudis announced the shooting down of one. They didn't show any, I looked all around, couldn't find pictures of the debris. But anyway, there is no doubt to, no reason to doubt their claim. They shot down one Scud fired from somewhere in Yemen into a town called Khamis Mushait, which is a very innocent name, hiding behind it, the largest Saudi Air Force base, the King Khalid Air Force Base, which is the main Saudi Air Force base guarding the southern Red Sea here. So there it is, and it was a success of the Patriot. Again, congratulations to the Raytheon people, the good job. And ending this part of creativity, some creativity in Gaza. Last week they celebrated a year to Operation the Protective Edge, which of course they celebrate as a victory. And they showed two new missiles, which may or may not be operational, probably not yet. They call them Qassam A and Qassam SH. But I want to point your attention, to turn your attention, look at this guy, the Hamas guy, and here is the rocket, just almost touching his belly. Look how big this rocket is. They are going to for size now, apparently, or at least they are going to impression. They are going to size. The name, the A and SH are the acronyms or the first letter of the two Shaheeds, after which those rockets are being called. There were two commanders, colonels in the Hamas, which were targeted and killed by us during the war. And even they even show a map. Look at that map here. They show the shorter range type hitting around the Tel Aviv area. I can judge it's about the Tel Aviv area. And the larger one going all the way to Netanya or Hedera. And the size means that if this is not just dog and pony show, and it represents some operational thinking on their side, I speculate that what they go for is larger warheads, figuring out that with Iron Dome cleaning out most of the things that fall down, the rest that leak through have too small warheads to cause damage. So since there is a leakage, it may seem to them operationally reasonable to try to fire bigger warheads. Those that leak will cause some pain. Whoever, but I'm outguessing the Hamas here. Maybe that's not what they think. It's a possibility. From here, I want to go to my main theme, which is the Iranian Integrated Space and Missile Program. Usually I do it once a year. I update it. There's tremendous amount of happening that happened in the last year outside of the limelights, and I want to draw your attention to that. It's proceeding at an accelerated race. It's not just a regular pace, accelerated pace. And the main highlights are those. First, we see an upgrading of older generation of rockets and missiles into precision, precisely guided munition. We see that going backward to the older types. We see the development and tactics of the fitting missile defense. They are very aware of missile defense, especially now that missile defense are being built in the Gulf by the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. And they are very aware of that and building the capabilities to defeat that. There is a tremendously high rate of production of existing and stockpiling of ballistic missiles. They are showing new depots. Perhaps there is a blip of information that may hint of exporting Iranian rockets to North Korea. It's unbelievable. We usually think about the traffic going the other way around, from North Korea to Iran. There may be a hint of reverse of direction, but I'm not sure that I'm perhaps reading the signs wrongly. Development producing long-range land attack cruise missiles, the new thing. The land attack cruise missile is now coming into the fore. I'm talking about a strategic land attack cruise missile, the one that can go up of the earth, not some improvised air target. And last but not least, acquiring the know-how and technologies for global range ballistic missile through the space program, and I'll show you how. So let's look at their precision rockets. Here I'm again playing something which I showed you before, but I want to reiterate that. What they did, I mean, technically, look, they are for us a mortal enemy, and they hate us, and they don't want to see us thriving. But I'm an engineer, I cannot avoid admiring good engineering work, and that's good engineering work. They took a basic rocket, a 610 millimeter rocket, and just divided. It was a bombardment rocket, not too accurate. They called it the Zilzal 2. And then they added precision to that. And they added precision in all kinds of ways. Several versions, there are about 5 or 6 versions of it now. The basic airframe is the 624-inch rocket, heavy rocket. Ranges vary between 250 and 300 kilometers. Warhead is more than half a ton. It's a hefty warhead. It will fall on a population area, it will destroy a block. So it's a blockbuster. They have land attack versions with GPS inertial guidance. Now they are precision weapons. They can hit specific building and specific targets. Probable accuracy could be anywhere between 10 and 50 meters, which makes it not a terror weapon anymore, but a military weapon. This is precision weapon from 300 kilometers away. And notice the range. Mainly it's designed against your allies and your forces in the Gulf area. And look at the map and look at the Fifth Fleet there and look at your bases there. They are all within range of this kind of weapons. Now with the precision, they can select their targets. When they are in Lebanon, they have the same weapons in Lebanon and Syria, and they can target our air bases now and our strategic targets, installations. And there is an anti-ship version, which has probably both optical and radar homing sensor, 2 different versions. And just to show you how the mines work, here is an illustration of Iranian illustration of a precision rocket like that attacking a ship. That ship happens to be a U.S. aircraft carrier. Well, that's a fancy, of course. It's an illustration, not a real picture, but that's what they are thinking about and training for. And in a South Korean movie about North Korean missile threats, I found, and I just sat back and reran it, a short clip that got excited. A short clip of, to my amazement, an Iranian rocket, Fatah 110, one of those precision rockets being featured there. Now, it could be that the editor of the South Korean video, he didn't know, not a technical expert. He showed a nice rocket, so he included it in. Or maybe he was playing a North Korean video. I'm not sure what it was. And the North Korean showed, if it was a North Korean video, showed an Iranian rocket there. Obviously, the Iranian rocket is in Iran. It's not in North Korea. Look at the terrain. So there are not many deserts in North Korea. So it could be a mistake. It could be that I'm seeing the shadows as real mountains. But it could be also that the South Koreans are thinking, the North Koreans thinking about acquiring such system, which will a great boon. They have nothing comparable to that. So for them, it's a great, very important decision. Makes sense. So again, I'm not saying that it's happening. I'm turning your attention to the fact it could happen, and maybe that they are thinking about it. As I said, reversing the trend, not from North Korea to Iran, but from Iran to North Korea. Another area, you see the precision going into all the Iranian weapon systems, the rocket system. Here is a picture from an exhibition of missile achievements in May 2014, last year, about a year ago. It featured all kinds of rockets, but what caught our eyes here in Israel was this rocket. This is now a small rocket. It's not 600 millimeters. It's now 300 millimeters. That means they are miniaturizing. That means they are becoming better engineering-wise. And now it's sporting winglets already, and it's becoming a precision weapon, comparable to your MLRS. And a year later, we saw its first test. Notice the little winglets here. This is 303 millimeters, matching the GMLRS, the American GMLRS, Lockheed Martin GMLRS, by performance and and precision, also GPS guided and everything. So those guys are developing major power technical capabilities. And it's going upscale too. We heard from Anthony Cordesman last year in his article in XIS about the smartening of the Shahab 3. The more evolved version of the Shahab 3 is called Qadr F. It has a range of about, he said for 1,700 kilometers, about 1,900 kilometers. And he spoke about, he didn't show any illustration, spoke about adding capability of steering to the re-entry vehicles. So I added this. This is not how, probably not how it looks. I added exaggerated winglets just to show you, to show you the notion. So once you do that, and if it's successful, it's not an easy program. He then managed to do it, and eventually they'll probably do it. Then they can make precision attacks from almost 2,000 kilometers away. Think about that. You don't need nuclear weapons. You can actually paralyze a country, Saudi Arabia or Israel or any other enemy that you have. By the way, 2,000 kilometers covers Egypt too. You can paralyze a country with few strikes of non-nuclear weapons if they are smartly chosen into strategic infrastructure. Try to run a country without power stations, for instance. Let me see you doing that. So you don't need nuclears in order to paralyze a country, and this is a weapon that can do that. Defeating missile defense. Two strategies. One strategy is saturation. We'll talk about it later. Another strategy is cluster warheads, and they've flown in February 2013. And this is an illustration, of course, not a real picture. Successfully tested a version called Barani. It means hailstones. They love those very fancy names, which, like you in the United States, loved the Greek gods in the past. There were patriots and heras. Now they love those very symbolic, emotional names. A hailstone. It's a Qadr F with a cluster warhead. Of course, this is an illustration by an illustrator who doesn't know much physics, because you don't find those things flying in formation in space and staying in clouds. They don't do it this way. But the idea is clear here. And to make sure that this is not just an artist's concept, again, referring back to the same arms exposition in May 2014, you see here another version, yet another version of the accurate Fatah 110, the 610 millimeter rocket, with a cluster warhead. That to make sure that you know it's a cluster warhead, they painted the cluster bombs on top of the shroud. But it's real and it works. The other strategy of defeating missile defense is quantities, saturation. And they're showing again and again. This is a very recent exposure, very recent disclosure, and yet more warehouses with rows and rows of completed rockets. And there is no reason to doubt that it's real. They showed 3 warehouses. A year before they showed another 3 warehouses. Are not the same. You look at the details of different warehouses. 2 of those are above ground. You see the windows here. This is underground. This is a tunnel. And here they show a missile called Qadr, Kayam, 800 kilometers, obviously designed against the Saudis, not against us. The range doesn't reach Israel, but it covers all the Gulf states and major targets in Saudi Arabia. It's a one-stage derivation, local derivation of the Scud Sea. Again, very clever aeronautical engineering. And here I show a row of the Qadr F, the 1,800 kilometers, and that's against us. So quantities, they intend to overwhelm our missile defense with quantities. And I think the top of it all is the long-expected strategic land attack cruise missile, which was anticipated since more than 10 years ago, since they stole about 20 of them. Soviet-made, Soviet-era KH-55, airborne strategic missile, 3,000 kilometer missile from the Ukraine. The Ukraine, to repeat the story, when the Soviet Union broke up, some of the strategic forces of the Soviet Union were marooned in Ukraine. There were strategic bombers and strategic nuclear-equipped cruise missiles, airborne cruise missiles. By the INF, they couldn't have land terrestrial-based cruise missiles, but they had the air-based cruise missile. And that one that they had, there are about 500 of them, called the KH-55. That's how it looks. By agreement between Ukraine and Russia, they were all returned to Russia traded for gas. However, about 20 of them or so found their way to North Korea, China, and Iran. 3 people were indicted for that. In Russia, all of them mysteriously died. And nobody knows anymore how it was done, but it was done. And obviously, from that point, it was obvious that this number of 20 is too small to use operationally, so it probably template for copying. And from that point on, I was predicting year after year the appearance of a 2,500 kilometer land attack cruise missile, which will look like the Soviet one. In 2012, the Iranians disclosed that they have a program like that, but didn't show a picture, and they call it Mishkat. They claim the range of 2,000 kilometers. I'll explain why this number is kind of a holy number. It makes political sense. The estimated range is about 2,500 kilometers. And obviously, it should have been patterned after the KH-55. And lo and behold, there it is, like a magician, a few months ago. Here it is. But for some a reason which I cannot explain, they love playing around with name. Now it's not called a Mishkat. It's called Sumur. Range was not announced, but here it is, and very quickly I put it on the drawing board and compared it to the KH-55. You can see here the KH-55. Here is a shot of the Sumur. It's a spitting image. Obviously, this is not a Chinese copy, it's an Iranian copy. Probably with a different engine. They have jet engines, perhaps from China, small jet engines. Small jet engines is a very clever thing to do. It's very tricky. You have only one company in the United States that specializes with it. It's Williams Research. And they may have bought a French design and upgraded it. But anyway, it's the same missile, same length, same diameter. You see the wing is exactly in the same place. The engine is in the same place, except that this is land-based. It takes off from the land. From land, we'll see a short video here, if it will work, of its takeoff.
According to Iran's defense,
This is Iranian TV.
enjoys modern technologies in navigation, propulsion, and structure.
The wings pop out. When it goes out of the canister, they pop out.
By relying on its high tactical capabilities, long survival over the battlefield, and radar evading properties.
So this is an achievement. This is a major technical achievement. It's not copying. It's not. It's even more difficult than designing a new one, to do a good Chinese copy. So again, I take my hat off for the guys who did it technically. And you can see the Russian influence here. Since it's a ground-based missile, they copied an air-based missile. It doesn't have a booster. It drops from an aircraft. So they needed to design a booster. And here is their designed booster, and here is a Russian booster on the Russian Club missile. The missile is different. But look at the booster, rocket motor, and look at the booster here. Well, it's not the same design, but you can see the Russian-style fingerprint of engineering here. Well, what is the strategic implication of this missile? It's too small for a first-generation nuclear bomb. Let's go back to this 2,000 kilometers. The rationale for the Iranian holy number, sacred number of 2,000 kilometers, we are not attacking Europe. We are just threatening Israel. So for Israel, 2,000 kilometers is good enough. I mean, it can attack Israel from way back, go all the way almost to the Pakistani border. But even if they go to Tabriz, which is the western Iran, they can't reach with 2,000 kilometers more than some countries in Eastern Europe, which are perhaps not too important. It's not Germany. They are very much not. They don't want to irk Angela Merkel, and not many people want to irk her. However, with this capability now of a cruise missile, which was once airborne and could be made again airborne, those guys have strategic air arm. Again, unadvertised. We are all hypnotized by their missiles, but they have long-range bombers, the capable Russian Sukhoi 24. And if they adopt an airborne version of that Sumur missile, they can fly 2,000 kilometers up to here in the middle Mediterranean, not in the direction of Europe, turn around and launch it north. And that will cover all of Europe. So under the radar, out of the attention, they are developing a European capability which I suggest that people pay attention to. Going to the space program, they managed to fly to orbit another satellite earlier this year. The earlier one, the latest one, was about 3 years ago, unadvertised. They had 3 failures, which I showed here in this forum. At least 3 failures, may have been more. Again, you can admire their persistence. They tried again and again and again, and finally, they had another success last year. One can learn a lot from their mindset and who is running business. It looks like a military operation. It means there's an order, fire again and again until you succeed. In the West, we don't have this tradition. When we have a major failure, we stop and go back to the drawing board and see what happens. Here they just sent them to the test range again and again until they were successful, which shows, again, this is not exactly a civilian program, but it's not I don't have to go into that because it shows it's not a civilian program. Although the space agency's so-called civilian program, it's coordinated with the rest of the defense establishment through the office of the Supreme Leader, which actually is a Supreme Commander, and obviously it's integrated in the totality of their missile programs. Look at the space launcher is basically a walked-up Qadr F. The launcher, here is the launcher of the space launcher. It's an adapted launcher of the Shahab 3 and the Qadr F. And look who's making the decision here. Here's an announcement. There are many examples like that of who's the boss. Here is a defense minister announcing they are developing a new test range for the space program. So there's an announcement of a new test range for the space program, a new spaceport, by the defense minister, who is a uniformed general in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So that shows you how symbiotic these programs are. And here is the new space launcher, the second generation. The picture doesn't do it justice. It's huge. Here is a person, the size of a person compared to that. The diameter is exactly like the North Korean UNA, 2.4 meters. This is about 80 tons or 90 tons space launcher, not tested yet. And here is its new the launching facility being built in Semnan, not far away from Tehran. The spitting image of the North Korean space facility with the same tower, same crane here. The simulator is striking. However, earlier this year, the Iranians showed something surprising. They have a program, a manned space program, with an ambition to put an Iranian astronaut in space by 2020 aboard an Iranian space capsule fired by an Iranian launcher. And here is a space capsule. They call it E1. What caught my eye is the diameter, 2 meters. That means it's going to sit on at least 2-meter rocket, or the upper stage will be at least 2 meters. So, looking at that, and being in my age, which is not too young, and I well remember I was a young engineer when the Americans started their own space program, it just slipped to my mind that it reminded me of the old time of the Mercury Redstone. But let's go back into their program. What they are showing is that they're going to do a suborbital by 2016, next year. I don't think it will happen, but perhaps, or aboard a Sapphire launcher. As an orbital test, a suborbital test, and you see, I think those guys know what they are doing. It's very well planned ahead. Here is this is of course an escape tower, so if there is an emergency, they detach and save the crew. The crew is probably one man. Here is a regular flight, suborbital flight, apogee. They didn't mention a range, but apogee 175 kilometers. And if there is a failure in deployment of the parachute, there is an emergency parachute. I mean, they really thought it out. It's well thought out, well planned. And again, it reminded me of what the United States did when the Soviets reached space with Yuri Gagarin, and by emergency, you had to go into a manned space program. So what you did, you took the only rocket that you had, available rocket at the time, the Redstone, the Jupiter C, and walked it up into a launcher and made a minimal space capsule here, which could take one man into suborbital and then to orbit for, let's say, 12 hours or so, that they don't need much provision in air. Very rudimentary, and I assume that this is what the Iranians are having in mind. A one-man capsule for short stays in space. So one can assume that the weight is about the same, 1.5 tons. Looking at that, what was the American next step? It was to go into orbit, to put an astronaut in orbit by the same capsule with an Atlas missile. So what is the equivalent? What is going? Obviously, that's what they have in mind. They are talking about a man in space by 2020 in orbit, probably with that capsule. So what's going to be under it? Now, being an engineer and doing the calculation, several other hints. One hint is the death of General Hassan Muqaddam, who was killed in a huge explosion not far away from Tehran, Bid Kaneh, in 2011, an explosion that rattled windows, broke windows actually in Tehran itself. So something huge exploded, and if you look at the explosion, probably something that had to do with a very big, solid propellant rocket motor that went bad and exploded. Beginner's problem. So I assume it's solid propellant. Next launcher is solid propellant. And again, hints are coming out of a next version of a huge space launcher called Koknuz. No other details known except the name. So taking one and one and making perhaps 3 or 4 out of it, I dare to speculate that the new launcher, the equivalent of the Atlas, will be like this. The weight will be about 160 tons. Diameter, I tried various diameters, around 2.5 meters, which is not far from the 2.4 meters, probably 2-stage. There is another hint that this is what's going on, and the hint is that they have yet another space launch facility being built. Here's the map of Iran. Semnan is the one that has the previous space facility, and the new one is built not far away from here. This is amazing. Another one, yet another one, and huge. Anything that boggles the mind. Here is the launching pad. It's 200 meters by 150 meters, made of solid concrete, 2 meters concrete, 6 feet of concrete. So it's built to absorb huge explosions. Again, solid propellant, big solid propellant motor come to mind. Also, another thing, it's built by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, not by the space industries. So we see some competition here between the organization. So I say all those clues bring to my mind that they have a roadmap, and this is the roadmap. They have the Safir, which is the one that fired, that orbits the small satellites we saw last winter. The bigger one is liquid, apparently done in some conjunction with North Korea, the Simorgh. And the next one will be a huge solid propellant, huge launcher which will take a manned space capsule into man and teach Iran everything they need to do about solid propellant ICBMs. They'll have all the elements, all the technological elements, huge solid propellant rocket motors, and what's a capsule, a manned capsule that goes into space, comes back. It's a re-entry vehicle. Replace the man with a bomb, and you have an ICBM. So through the space program, they're building all the know-how and all the building blocks to be able to do ICBM if and when they make the decision. That's why I say again and reiterate again, to my mind, looking at all these things, the picture is an integrated missile and space program leading to, on one hand, the capability to attack Europe with cruise missiles, on the other hand, the future to reach the United States with ICBMs when they are ready to take the decision. I'm not sure they made the decision yet. And now they have this some map from the MDA program, MDA publication about their main bases. And you can see the missile silo complexes are going into silos. One of them is obviously designed or located to threaten Saudi Arabia, and that one is located to threaten Israel and perhaps in the future Europe. So what does Israel do about it? With the help of the United States, again, I don't want to go into the whole Israel missile defense program, but recent achievement in the Israel missile defense program is the first, or not the first, but a series of very successful tests with David Sling. Let's see a short video here. Unfortunately, no soundtrack, but this is an official movie that was released, and you can see the target. It's a huge Black Sparrow target. We have to fire it from the Mediterranean at Israel. Believe me, I had a lot of trouble when we started developing this target. The idea that you fire a ballistic missile from a plane towards Israel is really jarring to Israeli engineers, but we had to overcome this reluctance. אני באמצע הרצאה כעת, זה דחוף. Okay. So the target is fired from the Mediterranean. The missile is going up there, the interceptor. And, well, the engineers love to show the shots. There is a lot of hype here. This is marketing, so excuse me for the hype. Here is another Photoshop. It's not only the North Korean that do it, we do it too. Looks great in conferences and expositions. Here's the main engine taking over. And lo and behold, here is the target coming down. The target represents a real capable ballistic missile. The interceptor locks on. And here is the hit, and this is hit to kill, no warhead. So I'm showing it again to the camera. Anyone, any critic of Israel missile defense can look for himself. You can see the target, you can see the missile. They hit each other. That's it. Another achievement is Iron Dome has undergone several testing of upgrades, which are not, the details are not available to the public, but recently, last week, I couldn't help it, added another capability was added to that, added the capability against UAVs, and Raphael published this promo. If you remember, we had UAVs, Hamas UAVs raiding into Israel last year. We had to shoot them down with Patriots. Patriots worked very well, and when I was here in September, again, I calculated the rate on people for the first operation, real operation kill of enemy aircraft. But we need the Patriots for something more capable than UAVs from Gaza. So we are seeing now the Iron Dome destroying UAVs. Patriot was put to very good use. Patriot was very good use after the war, if you remember, in September. It showed down a Syrian Sukhoi 24 over the Golan, and that's what's the really purpose of that system. And to deal with the Hamas UAVs, Hezbollah UAVs, Iron Dome, now Iron Dome can do it, and I'm very happy about that. So my concluding remark, I mean, I took you on a tour in the Middle East, and I showed you a lot of things. I mean, a wealth of things, and all of them are happening in the last year. So what is my conclusion from that? The only concluding remark I have is that life in the Middle East is not a picnic. Here you can see, to symbolize that, is Tel Aviv under attack, under missile attack last year. And you see Iron Dome taking off, probably not to defend Tel Aviv, but to the Ben Gurion airport, which is here to the left. And Tel Aviv under that, functioning. You can see traffic on the roads. You can see people there. The town is being attacked. Our missile defense is working, and life goes on. So there's a madhouse around us. We try to live our life and defend ourselves. And with that, I'd like to conclude. Thank you. And now I'm open for questions. I know that your first question is what about the Iranian deal? Is it? Yes.
Yeah, Jonathan Medalia from Congressional Research Service. I wanted to ask about Israeli capabilities against the terrain-hugging ground-launched cruise missiles, whether they're launched from Iran or from let's say, a cargo ship out in the Mediterranean. Is this a capability that Iron Dome has, or perhaps some other country?
Let me answer. It's a good question. It's actually an excellent question, because one of my slides was about that. But let me answer it in two parts. About capability against cruise missiles, the capability against cruise missiles coming from ships in the Mediterranean. David Sling is designed against cruise missiles, against these ground-hopping cruise missiles. And it has other parts like early warning, airborne, aerostat early warning that looks downward in order to locate those ground-hopping missiles. So we have this in our sights, and we are working on the solution. But talking about ships, I've just on the way here on the plane, I read an article about an Israeli company I didn't know that existed. It seems there is a company in Israel that tracks all the ships in the world. And they have software to slash out suspicious behavior of such ships, like changing name, taking out of course. And it comes to my mind that with capability like that, it will be very hard for anyone to take a ship out of the usual normal behavior and fire a missile from it without being noticed.
Dr. Rubin, I'm Dave Myers, Military Jews for Crews. Your technical ability is highly regarded. What is your feeling with the removal of the rocket embargo that's being thought of now? Will that wreak any havoc in Iran?
Well, I can answer in short that what I showed you happened in 1 year with an embargo on. Now just extrapolate to that what can happen without an embargo. I think that I was very happy to see that at least the embargo continues for about 5 years. I think so. I'm not sure this morning. Now I heard something else. But if it's true, and according to reports that I read, and again very preliminary because I read it here after I debarked from my plan, that was a Pentagon intervention. I could sympathize with what the Pentagon, they thought that the Iranians will be permitted to rearm, while on the other side of the Gulf there's all your air bases and all your naval bases and the Fifth Fleet there. The idea is unacceptable, I think, to any soldier. I appreciate your generals standing up in arms and saying, no, don't do it right now. So obviously, without an embargo, you can extrapolate from that. But let me say some remarks about the Iranian deals. I say that I'll comment about them. I think that when I look at this, the question is not. I am not an expert to deal with or to talk about the details of the nuclear part of the deal. Whether they are good or bad, will they stop the Iranians for 5 years or 10 years or not at all? Will they cheat or not cheat? I'm not the expert and not the man to ask about that. But what I want to turn your attention, in my opinion, that the real implication of that deal is not the nuclear part of it, but the deal part of it. It's a deal between Iran and the United States, and I was very impressed by articles published in the Wall Street Journal by Kissinger and Schultz in April that turned out my attention, and unfortunately didn't turn out too much attention to the fact that the deal itself is a historical event. So regardless of how effective is the nuclear part of it, whether it's even airtight, the fact that the United States, and it's the United States, don't make any mistake, not the P5+1. It's the United States that made the deal with Iran. Changing the relations between them. The relations were between the United States and the present regime of Iran were fixed in what they were up to now not by the Iranian Revolution, which was supported by the United States, but by the grasp of power of the Islamic regime. And the immediate thing that the Islamic regime did afterwards was the capture of the U.S. Embassy stuff. Now, in the civilization of the ancient civilization, harming envoys is a declaration of war. Once upon a time, when you wanted to declare war, you killed the envoy of the other side. Later became people more civilized and just disfigured them. And even later, they became even more civilized and just imprisoned them. Imprisoning envoys means a declaration of war. And in fact, you were in a state of some kind of Cold War with Iran and what it represents until now. This deal is shifting the relation. Now, what is the logic behind it? I found it encapsulated in an article in Haaretz by Chami Shalev, who I don't like his views. I don't violently disagree with some of his views, but as a journalist, he has a way with words, and it can encapsulate the dilemma, which I translated, paraphrased here for your benefit, in 2 short sentences. That for Israel, he says Netanyahu, but it's all of Israel. Iran is a big Satan which is out to overrun the Middle East and destroy Israel. But apparently for President Obama, Iran is a small Satan which can be rehabilitated. And this is actually the issue here. Who is right? If President Obama is right, and this deal will not make a regime change in Iran, but will change the regime and moderate it, and it will start dealing with its own internal problem and become beneficial, then this deal is an opening for a better and calmer Middle East. But if he is wrong, then what we'll have here is the good intentions, which are the raw material for the road to hell. And the Middle East will become a much more dangerous place than it was before. With Iran, and this is an answer what will happen without an embargo. More questions?
Well, that is going to make our weekend very pleasant. But I want to thank you, Uzi, and just for the record, for those of you interested in the Iranian agreement, there is a clause after the 5- and 8-year embargoes, and it says, or when the IAEA declares the Iranian nuclear program peaceful at that time, which is slated for December 15, 2015, whichever is earlier, the embargo on ballistic missile parts and conventional arms sales goes away. And that is whether or not the IAEA declares Iran in compliance with the agreement as a peaceful and legal agreement on December 15, 2015, the embargoes can go away. Just so, but, and the thing is, this entire agreement has those kinds of, on the one hand, on the other hand, and the two sometimes can't be reconciled. But I want to thank you for coming all the way from Israel. It's always an honor, sir, to have you here. I want to thank you and for all your remarkable insights into Middle Eastern missile threats and ballistic missile defense. Would you all give a warm thank you to Uzi Rubin? Thank you, my friend.
On Newsmakers, Labor Secretary Thomas Perez talks about the minimum wage.